Welcome to The Last Generation, the podcast where lived experience meets lasting change. I'm your host, Donna Simmons, author of Ashes to Flame, Transforming Trauma into Purpose, also a survivor, advocate, and truth teller. Welcome back to The Last Generation, Transforming Trauma into Purpose. I'm your host, Donna Simmons, and I'm so glad you're here. In our last episode, we explored the truth about jealousy, how it's not always about distrust in the other person, but often a symptom of wounds that live inside of us. Today, we're continuing that journey through the lens of something that often hides in plain sight, something that gets praised in our culture, but can be just as rooted in trauma as jealousy or anxiety. We are talking about hyperindependence. That deep, almost compulsive need to never rely on anyone, to do it all yourself, to never need, to never ask, to say, I'm fine, even when you're not. Does this sound familiar? Well, let's talk about where that comes from and what it's costing us. If you have ever felt the need to hide your weariness so others only ever see the strength within you, this episode is for you. And I hope it gives you even just a few moments to safely lay down your armor, knowing you are not alone. Hyperindependence is often described as a trauma response where someone avoids vulnerability or connection by relying only on themselves. It's not the same as healthy self-sufficiency. It's a protective posture, a survival mechanism. People who are hyper-independent don't just prefer doing things on their own, they need to. They believe they can't trust others because, well, they have plenty of evidence collected that confirms this. And this belief is usually formed in childhood or in relationships where asking for help resulted in shame, neglect, betrayal, or even punishment. Hyperindependence doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's usually born in moments that feel too small to matter, but then they change everything. For so many trauma survivors, the moment they stopped asking for help was the moment they learned that their needs were too much, or even worse, dangerous. In my memoir, Ashes to Flame, I write about one of my earliest memories. I was 3 years old. I had a meltdown, just like any toddler might, but instead of being comforted or gently guided, I watched my mother fall to the floor, clutch her chest, and pretend to have a heart attack. At 3 years old, I believed that I had broken her, that my emotions, my distress, had harmed someone I loved, someone that I depended on. And in that instant, I learned my needs were dangerous and my feelings hurt people. So I chose to bury them. And from that point forward, I began to carry more than just my own pain. I became the emotional container for everyone else. I learned how to read the room before I even knew how to read a book. I took responsibility for keeping things peaceful, and I internalized one of the deepest, most damaging beliefs a child can form. If I need too much, people will suffer, and so do I, so I will just need nothing. That's the root of hyperindependence. It's not strength. It's grief wearing a mask. When we're made to feel like our emotions are a burden, we stop sharing them. When no one comes when we cry, we stop crying. And when we learn that the people around us fall apart when we express pain, we take on the role of the one who holds everything together. And not just for ourselves, but for everyone. This is how children become emotional adults long before their time. And that child becomes an adult who's praised for being so strong, so reliable, so independent. But inside, that adult is tired, lonely, and afraid to let anyone see how heavy it really is. Because somewhere along the way they learned the only person who can carry my weight and the weight of others is me. Here are some ways hyperindependence might be showing up in your own life. If you feel uncomfortable receiving help, even when you need it, you may never ask for emotional support. You may feel weak when you're vulnerable. And maybe you'd rather fail alone than to succeed with the support from others. In relationships, you may distance yourself the moment things start getting too intimate. It's often praised, especially for women in leadership or men expected to be providers. But behind the applause is often a silent scream that says, I am tired of doing this alone. Just like jealousy, hyperindependence can quietly sabotage intimacy. It often shows up in avoidance, distancing, dismissiveness. And that's not because we don't want love, but because it feels unsafe to need it. It also makes us vulnerable to toxic relationships that reinforce the belief that it is unsafe for us to have needs, much less communicate them. I talk about this as well in my memoir, Ashes to Flame, and I'll share it here with you too. My perpetrator groomed me to become a vessel that served only as a mirror to what he wanted. And this was easy for him at that time since I was 14 and had already experienced this conditioning by my mother. But he manipulated me into thinking that he was going to show me what it really meant to feel loved. And so I started opening up to him. I shared with him my feelings about my parents, the abuse in my childhood, my inner turmoil, and he validated me. Only when I started recognizing the things he was doing that made me uncomfortable and I started speaking up about them, then he couldn't handle it. He would shrink into a tantrum and portray himself as the victim and point the finger at me in all the ways that I had failed him, just as my mother would do. Now, on the flip side, when I did put my own comfort aside and go along with what he wanted without much resistance, like going to a Hooters girl competition or a strip club, places I had zero interest in and, in fact, felt really uncomfortable with, I was praised and rewarded with him saying things like, I've never felt so close to you. Straight up manipulative bullshit. Attachment theory gives us a framework for understanding how this could happen time and time again.
Hi, I'm Mariel Hemingway, granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway, actress and lifelong advocate for mental health and healing. Do you ever wonder how someone can rise from unimaginable trauma and turn it into a life of purpose? Do you find yourself searching for stories of resilience, proof that transformation is possible even in the face of overwhelming darkness? Then you need to read Donna Simmons' powerful memoir, Ashes to Flame. This book is not just a story, it's a raw, unfiltered journey through the depths of childhood trauma, emotional and physical abuse, and the systemic failures that perpetuate cycles of harm. Pick up Ashes to Flame today. You will not regret it.
What does every USAA member have in common? Family. We're one big family who supports the military community and their eligible families. And if you, your parent, or spouse served, you could join our family and save big on auto insurance. Visit USAA.com/join today to check your eligibility. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
Those with avoidant attachment styles, often shaped by emotional neglect or inconsistent caregivers, tend to minimize their own needs and over-function in relationships. That's not just how you are, it's what you've learned. For those with anxious attachment, hyperindependence can be a hidden survival strategy. When connection feels unreliable, when love comes with conditions or abandonment, our nervous system learns to brace for loss. We start clinging emotionally, yet simultaneously over-functioning to avoid coming across as too much. And over time, that push-pull rewires us to believe that the safest way to be close is to not need anyone at all. Not because we don't crave intimacy, but because needing has hurt us before. In episode 3 of this podcast, my husband and I talk about what that's looked like in our own relationship, how my trauma trained me to overfunction, to anticipate his needs while suppressing my own, and how even in a safe and loving relationship, my nervous system would still go into shutdown if I felt like I was too much. Hyperindependence tells us that closeness equals danger. It whispers, don't get too comfortable. Don't get too close. You'll get hurt. So we either keep our partners at arm's length or we show up only in a caretaking role, never letting ourselves be cared for in return. But love cannot thrive where there is chronic self-abandonment. Healing from hyperindependence doesn't mean becoming dependent. It means stepping into interdependence, the kind of relational dynamic we're wired for. In Ashes to Flame, I talk about how I spent years priding myself on being the strong one, the problem solver, the survivor. But eventually I realized strength without support becomes a cage. As humans, we are biologically and emotionally wired for connection. Healthy relationships aren't luxuries, they're lifelines. And emotionally supportive, reciprocal relationships, here's what we should be able to expect. To express emotion without being punished or shamed. To ask for help without fear of being seen as weak. To be comforted when we're hurting, not dismissed. To be held in our mess and not only in our competence. To give and receive, not just one or the other. Interdependence isn't codependency. It's the sacred middle ground where I hold myself and you hold me in turn. And when we step into relationships where that's possible, we start to rewire what love feels like, what we believe love to be. The goal isn't to become someone who never needs. It's to become someone who can safely need and be needed in return. Hyperindependence wasn't just a personality trait for me, it was my identity. In Ashes to Flame, I talk about growing up in environments where being vulnerable had real consequences, where emotional expression was met with collapse or manipulation, where being the strong one felt like the only path to safety. I carried that with me into adulthood, into my friendships, and into my marriages. And it wasn't until I hit burnout, relational rupture, and emotional numbness that I realized I wasn't okay. I had learned how to survive, but not how to receive. Healing began when I stopped seeing asking for help as a failure. When I started letting people see my tears without apologizing for them. Letting others love me didn't weaken me. It restored me. And little by little, I reclaimed the parts of myself that I had locked away. This is what healing hyperindependence looks like. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's often as simple as a breath, a pause, a "yes, I need you" statement. You don't have to carry it all. And the next chapter of your story doesn't have to be written alone. If this episode spoke to you, then the next one might shake something loose in the best way. because next week I am going to share with you my story, not from a distant, polished place, but from the raw, real heart of it. The moments that shaped me, the trauma that nearly swallowed me, the systems that failed me, and the ways I rebuilt from the ashes. Ashes to Flame wasn't just my book title, it's my life. Now, I'm not a therapist. I don't have a PhD, but I have lived what I teach. I've sat suffocating in the dark, and I've clawed my way through to the light. And I believe with every cell in my body that lived experience is a kind of expertise that cannot be taught in any classroom. If you've ever felt that no one understood what you've been through, this next episode is for you. It's personal, it's unfiltered, and it might just help you see your own story with new eyes. You've been listening to The Last Generation, Transforming Trauma into Purpose. For more resources, visit traumatopurpose.com. If this episode resonated with you, consider leaving a review and joining the community online. Subscribe, and let's transform together.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.